What's up guys, welcome back to Ride the Beam. I have now been living on my motorcycle for almost 2 years, and I've gotten a lot of questions about how much it costs to live this way and to travel this way. So in this video I thought I would break down the costs of living permanently on a motorcycle, at least from my perspective. And at the end of the video I'll give you a couple of tips of how to save money, a bit unconventional ways to save money when you're traveling. The biggest obstacle for most people when planning to travel is, of course, money. And that was also the case for me. And traveling in Europe, where I have been, is quite a lot more expensive than most other places, alongside with America, North America, I guess. But the cost, of course, depends on what you want, what kind of trip you want to go on, and what kind of luxuries you expect or want. But you can travel quite cheaply if you are very low maintenance. I'll start with telling you how I saved up the money myself before I go on to talk about the cost of the actual trip itself. If you have been following the channel for a while, you know that originally I planned to travel from the North Cape to Cape Town with my then girlfriend Pia, but that didn't exactly go to plan. But when we started planning the trip, we took on extra shifts and we worked our asses off for about 6 months, and we managed to save about $10,000 roughly. And that money went to insurances mostly, and a little bit of gear here and there. And then we decided to sell our apartments, both of our apartments, and all of the things we didn't feel like we needed, like couches and washing machines and all of this stuff. And we plan to spend the profits from the sale of her apartment to buy the motorcycles, which was about 30,000 euros, so 15,000 euro each for the two bikes that we got. And I got about 15,000 euro from the sale of my apartment, or dollars. Euro dollars is not too different, so it's more or less the same. It's very rough estimates, but I got about $15,000 from or 15,000 euro from the sale of my apartment that was supposed to go to the trip itself. So when we started the trip at the North Cape, we had about $15,000 roughly that we were planning on getting to Cape Town with, after all of the insurances and all of the legal things were paid. But then, of course, we ended up in the accident and everything that happened after. And when I came out of the hospital and started coming to myself again, I didn't have Pia with me anymore, but I had 150,000 kroner, about 15,000 euro. And I just decided on that is the money that I'm gonna live on, and when I run out, I'm finished. That was my plan when I started. So travel until I run out of money, and then see what happens after that. I didn't really know how long I would be away for. I didn't really have any plans whatsoever. During the trip, I also made a little bit of money on YouTube and Patreon and the sale of coffee and stuff. So from you guys, you helped me a lot. So I didn't really make a lot, but combined with all the YouTube revenue and all the Patreon things and all of that, I made like roughly 300 to 400 euro per month. Some months a little bit more, some months a little bit less. But that really helped me quite a lot, and it extended my trip several months. Plus, I went back to Norway in December to sell coffee here at the Christmas market in Trondheim, and that made me about 2,500 euro, I think. So that also, of course, helped quite a lot. But what did I actually spend the money on during the trip? What is the actual cost of living day to day on a motorcycle? Before I left, I of course had to get all the gear that I needed. So I had to buy a Klim suit. I didn't have to buy the Klim suit, but I bought a Klim suit, and I bought lots of camera equipment, and memory cards and hard drives and like gloves and helmets and all of this stuff, which all in all probably amounts to about 12,000 euro, I would guess, and that I had to spend before leaving, just to get everything sorted. So during the trip, I spent a decent amount of money on just maintenance and just all the things that you need to keep the bike running. So I think the trip lasted for about 75,000 kilometers, roughly 75,000. And I got new tires and a service on the bike roughly every 12,000 kilometers, something like that. And I changed the oil every 5,000. I did that myself every other time when I didn't put it in the shop for service. So in total, I think on the whole trip, I spent roughly about 5,000 euro on maintenance of the bike, including tires, oil changes, services, all of this. Like, I think roughly maybe like 600 or 700, 800 euro on average each service, roughly. And I flew home a couple of times, two times, was it 2 times or 3 times? I think I spent roughly 1,000 euro on plane tickets to go back to Norway for the few visits, and those were my biggest sort of expenses, or like one thing kind of expenses. So after like excluding all of that, the money that I was spending on just living on the bike was about 12,000 euro for 22 months. So I was living quite frugally, but it didn't really feel that way. I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything. And most of this money, of course, went to like gas, accommodation and food, mostly, plus a little bit of like luxuries here and there, or yeah, coffees and stuff like that. And since I was camping most of the time, I saved a lot of money on accommodation. I think in the 75,000 kilometers I drove, I spent roughly 4,000 euro total on gas, and I tried to save as much money as possible on accommodation by staying in tents whenever I could. But when I did book an Airbnb or something like that, I tried to stay under 30 euro. So most of the nights I paid was less than 30 euro. Of course, it depends on which country you're in. In France and Spain, it's more expensive than it is in Kosovo or Greece or whatever. And it depends on the city you're in. But I think the average cost was about 30 euro per night or the average cost was probably around like 25 euro per night. And I tried to not book things that were much over 30 euro, if I could avoid it. In Kosovo, for example, it was 450 euro per night. And in some places in France, it was like 90 euro per night, the cheapest you could get. It's a little bit difficult depending on where you are. But on average, I think I spent about 4 nights a week in a tent and 3 nights a week in a place to charge up stuff and shower and all of this. And for food, I think on average, I spent about 15 euro a day on food. Some places more, some places less, but yeah. Each week was, of course, different, but I think on average, I spent between 150 to 250 euro per week, depending on where I was. So, like in Kosovo, it's really cheap, and in Athens or Croatia, the bigger cities or whatever, it's more expensive. So, yeah, it depends on where you go. But around 200, 250 euro per week total costs, if you don't include any maintenance or anything like that, just for living. And I feel like with that, I lived in like luxury, and I spent like 3 to 4 nights normally a week in a tent. So yeah, that's like a basic general breakdown of what it has cost me to live on the bike. It shows that you don't really have to be a millionaire to get to travel for a long time and have a lot of experiences. I think if you include everything I've spent on absolutely everything, it's around 30,000 euro, plus minus. But the travel money, like that also includes, well, except for the purchase of the bikes, that was 15,000 euro each, of course. But everyday expenses, roughly 15,000 euro, has been what I've been spending on this whole trip for 22 months. But I noticed there are a lot of ways to actually save money. Most classical saving tips is like buy cheaper clothes or get cheaper gear, avoid buying these and these things and blah blah blah. But what I have saved the most money on has actually been just meeting people and accepting kindness. That has been one of the biggest surprises for me on this whole trip, this whole thing. I've gotten so much free food and free accommodation and free stuff just by talking to people and accepting people's invitations. So many people have invited me to come stay in their house. They've cooked me dinner, they've given me like food, invited me for coffee, all kinds of things. Just because I find it interesting to talk to people and I'm curious. And I try to accept all the invitations that I can get. That has led to, well, saving a lot of money. I've saved probably thousands of euro just because people have given me things, and I said yes. But also the human contact and the connections you meet when you do that is completely different, and it's very different from the culture that I'm used to. Here in Norway, we're not like frugal or anything like that, or like. But here we like to keep to ourselves. We don't want to bother other people. But when you go to other countries, it's completely different. People are opening up. They want to talk to you. They find it interesting that you're a stranger and they want to hear your story. And in exchange for that, they often give you food, give you accommodation, give you tips, a lot of things. And for me, that has been a really, really good trade-off. I told myself when I started this thing that I would say yes to every opportunity that came along. And I have, and that I think has been the best decision I've made on this whole adventure. Just say yes to everything. Even if it seems weird or not fun or whatever, it's going to be an experience that you're going to remember. And people really like to give of themselves and show foreigners and strangers the things that they are proud of. And so you get to learn a lot and they get to show it off and you both win. The amount of like cakes and food and fruit and whatever that people have given me has probably fed me for 6 out of the 22 months on this whole trip, which is quite amazing, I think. And by befriending people, they've given me free accommodation for days and weeks sometimes. Like in Turkey, in Istanbul, Mustafa offered me a whole week for free, just because we were hanging out and had fun together. It helped me a lot. He had fun and got to talk to me and ask me questions about the places I'd been and my culture and all of that which he found interesting, and I got to stay for free and learn about his culture. It's a really, really great trade-off, I think. But of course, one of my biggest single expenses has been coffee on this whole trip. I try to visit every coffee shop I can. But also here, because I am very curious, I've learned that if you go into a specialty coffee shop and you just ask questions, like genuine questions, and are genuinely curious, you start asking about origins and roast levels and brewing recipes and just genuine curiosity, like what the theme of the place is, how the people got into coffee, the questions like this that opens up conversations. By doing that, I've actually not had to pay for coffee in most of the coffee shops I visited, which is quite cool. Because coffee people, when they find someone who are really interested, they want to show off what they have. So they make you like all kinds of different coffees, and they never let you pay. So although I've spent quite a lot of money on coffee, I've probably had more free coffee than what I've paid for, because I'm curious and ask questions to the baristas. This only works in the specialty coffee shops where people are genuinely interested in coffee. But that's also the only places I like going to. So that has been a very useful tip for me. I guess that's basically the breakdown. Not a very thorough breakdown, but more or less what this whole experience has cost me. Sum it up, about 30,000 euro total for everything excluding the bikes. So 15,000 euro for the bike, and about 15,000 euro for all insurances, equipment, all of this, and about 15,000 euro to live on, roughly. This for this whole 22 months. So now you know. If you want to go on a trip as well, you know what you can get away with and how much money you can live on. And I feel like with this money, I've actually lived in luxury. I haven't been frugal. I feel like I have not missed out on absolutely anything in this whole thing. I probably could have cut the costs in half and still lived a pretty decent and comfortable life. But for me, with the luxuries that I've allowed myself to have, 15,000 euro lasted me almost 2 years. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode or this video. If you did, give me a thumbs up, click subscribe and ring the bell, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.